Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here. Happy Friday. Today we are going to be talking about quite a few things. We've got quite a bit of news, starting with Tesla Energy. We've also got price bumps or price increases on Tesla vehicles. We've got some news on Tesla's next generation FSD hardware and a few other items as well. Looking at the stock, the fun has ended a bit from what we had earlier this week. Tesla down 5% on the day today, closing at $196.89. Still, obviously, a very great month for Tesla so far. The Nasdaq today was down 0.6%, so a big underperformance, but you do see here that the Dow and the S&P were up. Usually if those are up and the Nasdaq is down, that's probably a worse environment for growth stocks. So I don't think anything too Tesla specific today, but depending on the type of stock you're looking at, you can kind of see mixed performance here. Apple up, but Nvidia down, 5% or so as well. So again, probably not anything too Tesla specific. As we look into next week, we will get updates on the CPI and PPI reports on Tuesday and Thursday respectively. So a bigger week for macro news next week. There was a change to the CPI reports for 2022 today. This is a standard process that happens each year. Basically, they readjust seasonal adjustment factors each year. So this is adjusting all of the data for the entire year last year. Of course, most of the conversation today was focused on the revisions for the last 3 months as the inflation numbers or CPI numbers were revised to be increased by about 10 to 20 basis points between October, November, and December. So you can see here that although those did have increases, as did August and April, there were also 5 months in 2022 that the inflation number was lowered for based on those seasonal adjusted factors. So you'd probably like to see lower numbers more recently, as that would indicate a better trend. This actually kind of makes the trend worse in both directions with the revision, but nonetheless, still relatively small changes. So we'll see next week how that kind of continues. The other thing that we got kind of on the stock today, updated note from Morgan Stanley, this is actually last night from Adam Jonas, just thought kind of worth mentioning because it was pretty interesting. First here talking a little bit about sentiment, says that in recent calls with incoming clients, they have noticed a change in sentiment as stock price has risen. People are a little bit less excited about the stock, it sounds like, so always kind of interesting to take note of that. Not that it means a whole lot long term, but always useful to keep an eye on sentiment for more short term type of stuff. And then he does also mention just valuation in general here, basically saying that the sharp increase that we have seen in the stock has closed the quote unquote valuation case for Tesla even faster than it opened from the previous drop. So although obviously part of that would be true, it did just kind of remind me of things that we had talked about from Morgan Stanley and Adam Jonas notes before, where when Tesla was kind of climbing the ladder up to that $1 trillion market cap, a lot of analysts recognized that was a good thing because that's, even for the stock, because that allows Tesla pretty, unrivaled access to capital at those types of valuations. So that was perceived as a good thing at the time. And now here, it's kind of the opposite based on just sort of a different environment. But I thought it was worth pointing out how two things that really are the same can be taken differently based on the context, which again goes back to kind of that sentiment point mentioned at the top there. So other than that, nothing too crazy from that Jonas note. The first thing from Tesla news perspective that I want to get into then is an update on Tesla Energy. So a pretty exciting announcement here. This is called the Oneida Energy Storage Project that was announced today. The partners have all finalized agreements on this. This is a project that will be in southern Ontario in 2025, and an agreement has been finalized and executed with Tesla. The project is going to be a 250 megawatt or 1,000 megawatt hour Tesla Megapack system, scheduled to be completed, as I said, in 2025. So a couple of years out, but 1 full gigawatt hour there from Tesla, which if we think about the excitement that we've got around Lathrop and the Megafactory, hopefully by that point in time, that's only, a week or so of energy storage production for Tesla, maybe even less if we're lucky. But still, nonetheless, a huge, huge project, one of the biggest that we have seen announced. And, hopefully we continue to see more and more projects like this, but, always fun to get those announcements. So look forward to that. But again, hopefully at the time, relatively small scale. Next year, some pretty good news, I think. We've got a couple of price increases actually on the Model Y. One of them just coming tonight, but the first one, I think happening yesterday. This was a 2,000 RMB increase on the Model Y in China. On the base version. This is the rear-wheel drive, I believe, rear-wheel drive version. Let's see if I can translate that quick. But Yeah, the opening one is a rear wheel drive there. So 2000 RMB, it's about 290 US dollars. So it's not a huge increase, but this is going to be presumably Tesla's most, highest percent of mixed vehicle there out of all the vehicles. So even a relatively smaller increase on, that version will have an outsized impact on the mix. So should be helpful, and also should indicate that, hopefully that's a good sign of demand for Tesla on this vehicle in China. And like I'd mentioned before, when we had seen price increases, that does give Tesla a window, like we saw them do with the Model 3 here in the United States a week or so ago. It does give them a window to say, hey, we're going to adjust other prices too and maybe lower those. We didn't see any lowering of any other trims or any other vehicles. So I think positive to see that. That being said, the delivery estimates, as you can see here, are still pretty short, 2 to 5 weeks on this base version. I think even some of these are a little bit shorter. Performance 1 to 4 weeks. No changes in pricing on the Model 3. That's still listed as 1 to 4 weeks for both versions in China. Obviously, a lot of that depends on Tesla's allocation strategy. The pricing too is a little bit dependent on what Tesla does with exports. So this may be an indicator of China demand. It may also just be an indicator of how strong demand would be in Europe too. If Tesla's got more demand there at a higher price, obviously they can make the decision to export more vehicles. So it's all interrelated. It's all as a function too of Tesla's production rate at Shanghai and then also Berlin. So a lot of factors going into it where we don't want to overread into it, but certainly would be happier to see this increase than further price cuts. Now we've also got a similar change in the United States. Tesla's increased the Model Y performance price by $500. So previously $57,990, now up to $58,490 for that, base level or starting out points for the performance Model Y. So a little bit bigger of a gap there. Tesla has cut this gap a little bit over time between the price for the long range and the performance. So extending that out a little bit should increase the mix, or rather decrease the mix of the performance, increase the mix of the long range, and then of course the 4680, standard range type of vehicles that Tesla's introduced more in inventory. So interesting to see that, probably a good sign, but again, like we talked about with the Model Y in China, this is the base version, so that's going to have much more significant impact than the performance, which would be a much smaller portion of the sales. All right, next we've got an update on Tesla's Hardware 4, so feels like we've been talking more and more about this. Drive Tesla Canada today reporting on some news that was shared on a forum over in Europe. They say that the European type certificate that has been issued, dated January 20th, does include, quote, the introduction of Generation 4 complex vehicle control system for Autopilot, end quote. So, like I said, we've been talking a lot about this. This seems to reference this for Model S and Model X vehicles in terms of this vehicle approval document. So, presumably, since this is the start of 2023, that means that Tesla would be intending to introduce that at some point on these vehicles this year. Of course, Elon has been clear that Hardware 4 will be on the Cybertruck, so probably not all that surprising. There's no other information here on dates or timelines other than just, that's kind of being an update to the paperwork. But of course, it also depends too on how long it takes to ship these vehicles over to Europe from when we might see Tesla start actually introducing this hardware. Maybe Tesla could, switch over to a European batch, start building those things now and put them on a boat, and we don't know about it for 6 weeks or something like that. So maybe they're already in production on this, but we'll have to unfortunately wait and see. But again, just more and more news on this, that it definitely is looking more and more imminent by the day. So hopefully we'll see something more on that soon. Remember, we've talked about that high definition radar, but sounds like we'll have to wait at least until March to get a little bit more information on that. All right, next we've got a couple of charging updates. Marco RP Tesla has followed the Supercharger and Megacharger rollouts very closely, has found that Pepsi has filed a permit or submitted application for an 8-stall site at their production facility in Fresno, California. So this would be adding to what we know previously, locations that they have Megachargers installed at in Sacramento and Modesto. He's done a great job of putting these on the map so far, just building out a Google map. It's at megacharger.info if you want to follow this. Definitely a helpful resource as this expands. But we can see now the Fresno location added to the Modesto and Sacramento locations. And then, of course, Tesla would have chargers there at Giga Nevada as well. So pretty cool to see this, very early day reminiscence of the Supercharger network back in the day. I'm sure we'll see this start out in California, but it'll be fun to watch this, broaden out across the US and hopefully globally over the next few years. Next, we've got an update on the Supercharger network rather than the Megacharger network, or I'm not sure if Tesla's even calling them Megachargers anymore or Tesla Semi-Chargers, but Reuters today reporting on the US government plans for funding of EV charging stations. Of course, if you watched the State of the Union address earlier this week, I think, or if you watched the last one in 2022, similar messages. But of course, the government has talked about the funding for 500,000 stations in the United States. So Reuters here reporting that the Department of Treasury is, according to some sources that have talked to Reuters, is expecting next week to finalize requirements around those charging stations and the funding for them. So a part of this, unsurprisingly, is that it is going to require CCS. So of course, Tesla has done that in some cases internationally, particularly in Europe, I think in China as well. But with CCS, we'll see if Tesla wants to make that change in the United States. It seems like Tesla holding a little bit tighter here. Of course, they opened up the charging standard, now calling it the North American charging standard. We'll see if anybody else adopts that or if that allows them any access to this funding if and when that were to happen, or if Tesla will kind of acquiesce to this and start putting CCS here in the United States too. It's definitely an interesting thing to see. Obviously, the predominant charging method would be Tesla's, but proprietary to Tesla right now, or at least has been historically. So we'll see if Tesla makes changes to get that funding. Elon has been, I don't know if hesitant is the right word, or pushed back a little bit on some of those things, doing some of those things just for funding like this. But we've also, on the other hand, heard Tesla talk about opening up the Supercharger network and doing that in the United States as well. So we'll see what these regulations are, or sort of guidelines are, hopefully next week, and probably can talk a little bit more about it at that point in time. And then also from Reuters today, or I guess this is actually earlier this week, but I hadn't seen it until today. The president of Mexico did comment on possibilities for Tesla and a factory in Mexico, saying that they are looking at a new plant that could be installed in either the states of Nuevo Leon or Hidalgo. So these are, as you may remember, both of the locations that we had previously talked about. Nuevo Leon was first. Hidalgo, this is the area right by Mexico City, so much further south. We'd previously heard that Tesla had been shown both locations. From this comment, it sounds like they're still evaluating both locations, so maybe a little bit further off than what the reports in kind of early January had suggested. So wanted to pass that along on Mexico as well. And then we do have a couple of other factory updates. If we go back here, first on Giga Berlin. This one is a little bit more of a regulatory headwind again in Berlin. Authorities have told Tesla that they need to stop construction work on solar panels that they are installing in the parking lot. So definitely would be nice to see. Apparently Tesla was putting 104 stakes on the site, about a meter long concrete stakes that they did not receive approval for, so construction there has been halted. Elon reacted to this on Twitter saying sigh. So, Elon a little bit frustrated with some of those things as well. But hopefully they can get that sorted out, and obviously not critical to anything production related with those solar panels. And then I've also got an update on a factory that many people have probably forgot about, Tesla's, Giga Buffalo or Giga New York. This is where Tesla does a lot of things for solar. They also build supercharger equipment there. They've got some Autopilot team members on staff there for things like auto labeling. But as part of the incentive package that Tesla got for that facility, which is convoluted trickle down from a few different acquisitions along the way, for those funding requirements, Tesla needs to fulfill certain job milestones at the end of each year. That's always been like a Tesla Q talking point, that Tesla wasn't going to get it and they'd end up being fined. But Tesla's always met it. This year they were required, at the end of 2022, they were required to have almost 1,500 jobs, and they actually had 1,700 full-time workers. So they met that requirement for another year, which is great to see, and also very unsurprising. And then the last couple of things, I guess we'll kind of wrap up with Tesla stuff for the week on a rumor here. So this is just posted on the Tesla Motors Club forum. And let's see. Sorry, I just looked over at chat and I thought something was going wrong, but it looks like everything's okay. So a couple of these rumors, basically this person has been doing some Ubering in their Tesla down in Arizona, and they happened to pick someone up that said that they worked for Tesla and was in location for a Supercharger meeting, and said that the conference was about the committee planning to double Supercharger capacity in the next 18 months or so. So, that would be probably a faster rate of growth than we have seen on Tesla's Supercharger growth historically. I'd have to go back and kind of check how that would compare. Didn't have quite enough time to do that today, but presumably that would be significant growth or a significant improvement in the growth rate. It's unclear if this would be globally or if this would be in the United States or continental United States or what that exactly would mean, but sounds like aggressive growth plans there. And he also said that 2 weeks ago he's at Giga Texas, 50% of the factory is dedicated to Cybertruck production. That could just be space, doesn't necessarily mean level of production, but kind of an interesting note on that. And then he said, finally, as he was getting out of the car, he said Tesla's got a lot on its plate, but, quote, we feel like 2023 is going to be the big year for Tesla, end quote. So again, just a rumor. This person could easily just be making this up, but they've been on the Tesla Motors Club forum for 3-4 years now, so hopefully not the case. Sometimes these things can be even a little bit more reliable than the stories that we tend to get from store employees or things like that, where it's just sort of a random run-in with someone that works for Tesla out on the street. But we'll see, if any of that comes to fruition. And then lastly, just an update on Volkswagen. Something that we've heard before, Volkswagen will be speeding up its shift to electric cars and revamp its software strategy in a 5-year investment plan presented to the board, the supervisory board, today. So they'll share more details on this on March 14th publicly, but it sounds like they've sort of aligned on a plan, which will be interesting to hear about as, of course, they've had new leadership sort of installed that has definitely changed up plans on EVs and on software over the last few months. So we'll see what their plans are there, but that'll wrap it up for today and for the week. So as always, thank you for listening. Make sure you're subscribed and signed up for notifications. You can also find me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast, and we'll see you next week for the Monday, February 13th episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.